You're listening to the Pithy Chronicle. History with a bite. I'm Caroline.
And I'm Erica. And we bring you history's dirtiest deeds, dripping with sarcasm.
Are you hungry yet?
Welcome back, Pithy listeners. Thank you so much for being patient with us. Quite frankly, the most unpredictable summer in my recent history. I finally have a working computer, and after forgetting, resetting, rebooting, and reimagining all of my emails, passwords, and IDs, we are finally working and operational again.
So exciting. I also got the plague, so that was fun.
Yeah.
Also, this is my momentary PSA. If it is midnight in an airport and you see a woman carrying her 5-year-old with vomit streaming down her back, covering the hem of her dress and in her shoes, don't be that jackass that literally looks and walks away. Go get them a paper towel.
Oh my God.
People watched me and literally avoided me as if I had the bubonic plague, to include the janitor that walked by, laden with a cart, a mop, and an entire thing of paper towels. And he says, quote, "Union, I'm off time."
Mm-hmm. Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. Not assault.
Yeah, I'm telling you. I just believe that we could be kinder to one another.
Yeah.
So be kind. And I say that as we're about to examine the life of a woman to whom almost no one was kind.
Or helpful.
They not only left her holding the child with vomit streaming down her back and squishing in her shoes, but then they just decided to execute her as well, which honestly in that moment I might have been okay with.
If you're gonna chop, it's gonna be one time? Yes, okay.
I don't have to do this anymore.
Before we hop in, I want to take a moment to do some housekeeping. We have our merch store up and ready for you guys on our website, www.thepithychronicle.com. We have baseball caps, tote bags, some very cute Circa Baby t-shirts for purchase. You can also purchase our children's series, Once Upon a History, and their corresponding apparel in our merch store. Once Upon a History is a story-style series for kids. Say that 5 times fast. We discuss American heroines, and if we get enough interest, we will produce a second season. Mm-hmm. These are 10-minute episodes, perfect for your commute or your summer travels.
It is listenable for a parent. Mm-hmm. It's much better for an adult. They're soothing.
Yeah.
Mine listen to them as they fall asleep at night.
I've had more people be like, whoa, I didn't know these existed, so that's on us. We'll do a little bit better promotion, but take a listen. They're 99 cents a pop and totally worth the money. Additionally, we have a Patreon where our plans start at just $3 a month, and I have just set us up a buy us a coffee
or an energy drink
for $1. This is perfect for folks who just want to give a one-time donation rather than a monthly subscription. And you can feel like you've supported the Pithy Chronicle, which we love. Now, for free, and honestly, this is the most important.
The most.
Can't tell you how rare it is that the free option is actually the best. We ask you to rate and review our podcast wherever you listen.
We've gotten a number of new reviews, and I just want to say thank you. We have also gotten a number of new patrons on Patreon, and we also want to say thank you.
Exactly.
All right, Erica, take us back. Mary Queen of Scots
has escaped to England, put under house arrest after being in house arrest, losing her twins, being raped, forced into marriage, and then being forced into an abdication. That's where we find her.
We find her standing in the airport covered in vomit.
Yes.
It's bad.
It's bad. I do want to start out with Bothwell, just so we know what kind of man he is and how far back his machinations run.
I thought we'd already established that by the fact that he abducted and raped her in order to make him king of sorts.
What if I told you this was not the first time?
Oh, God. I guess I'd say I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Because it's a good plan, all things considered.
Is it? Is it?
For him. For him.
In 1560, he visited Copenhagen, met Anna Trond Rustung, daughter of the Admiral of the Danish Navy. The two became engaged and left for Scotland together with the huge dowry presented by her father. Bothwell abandoned his bride-to-be, but not the dowry, while en route home in Holland.
Did she die?
We'll see.
Oh.
In 1566, just a mere 6 years later, he married Jean Gordon, second eldest daughter of George Gordon, Earl of Huntley, which, by the way, we're going to have a little small bite about him, and let me just tell you, it is corpsey. And I'll leave it at that. The marriage, unfortunately, but not surprisingly, was not a happy one, and Jean accused Bothwell of adultery with her maid and her seamstress. The marriage was annulled on the grounds of consanguinity, not adultery.
Because he cheated, so that's fine and dandy.
Yeah, who cares?
Yeah.
But that consanguinity. 8 days after the divorce, Bothwell married, if that's what you want to call it, Mary, Queen of Scots, and we all know what kind of husband he was to her.
Husband's a strong word.
Major air quotes. That's just the tip of the iceberg of his, and I really don't want to say love life, because I genuinely don't think this man loved anyone other than himself and power, so let's just call this the beginning of his cycle of abuse. After Mary fled to England, Bothwell fled to Scandinavia, but it was there that his past caught up with him.
Oh, yeah. If I was that Danish admiral,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be thrilled.
He was captured off the coast of Norway, which at that time was Danish territory, and taken to the home of his former love, Anna Thronson, who then sued him for abandonment, as she should. Bothwell was able to settle the case with Anna out of court, giving her one of his ships and promising her an annuity for the rest of her life.
Did she get the dowry back?
I think the annuity was supposed to make up for the dowry.
What about her reputation?
Yeah, no. Although he managed at first to gain the Danish king's goodwill by offering to help recapture the Orkneys and the Shetland Isles, his luck ran out after the fall of Mary, Queen of Scots, when she, spoiler, got executed. He was imprisoned. Solitary confinement led to Bothwell going insane. He died 1578, but even his death did not release him from the rightly vengeful clutches of Anna Trond Rustung. A mummified body believed to be Bothwell's could still be viewed until it was buried at the request of Bothwell's descendants in the 1980s.
And it couldn't have happened to a nicer person.
Yes. Truly.
Why do they care? Honestly, would you claim descendancy from this dude?
I think it would be like, let's put an end to our shame.
I'd be like, we are of the other Bothwell clan, the non-rapist Bothwell clan. You just pretend you don't know him.
And we're not really going to talk about him anymore. So,
bye.
Within a short space of time after fleeing, Mary was conducted to Carlisle Castle. While at the castle, the deputy governor sent a message to Elizabeth's lieutenant in the West Marches. Hey dude, the Queen of Scots just showed up at my house.
Oops.
What do I do? He was a deputy governor. He was not a lord. He was not of the nobility, so it was no part of his job to insult a foreign monarch.
No, that's dangerous.
Yeah, he treated Mary with all the deference due to her rank, paid her expenses, organized clothes and horses for her. This encouraged Mary to think that the English government would support her, right?
Sure.
And she wrote to the Earl of Cassilis that she anticipated a return by mid-August with an army in tow.
Where did she think the army was going to come from? This lieutenant governor?
I have no clue.
Mary believed someone would stop to help the woman covered in vomit. Mary believed Elizabeth would actually assist. And I think that that's partly because Mary had been in a court where women were given quite a bit of presence and prestige, and she didn't understand how tenuous Elizabeth's grasp on power was.
Right.
I mean, you'd think she'd know about how difficult the Protestant-Catholic relations were, but I don't think she understood what Elizabeth's position was.
No.
Or perhaps just trusted more in the goodness of humanity. Mistake.
I genuinely think she was so convinced of her right to rule that she assumed everyone else was as convinced as she was. And that's just not true.
She did not see the real situation. That's unfortunate.
In October of that year, the Conference of York was called. Elizabeth wanted proof that Mary was innocent of Darnley's murder before agreeing to a meeting. Okay, fair. Mary initially refused to attend, rejecting the proposition that she could be called to account by a foreign government. Again, Okay, kind of fair.
Except that she wants that foreign government to support her bid for the throne. So not as fair.
But if we're thinking about the idea of a jury of peers, so to speak, she has no peer except Elizabeth.
Yeah.
I think she would have taken no, but she wanted to hear it from Elizabeth. And Elizabeth never gave it to her. James, her half-brother, and his supporters did attend. And Mary, once she had considered the matter, agreed to send commissioners to act for her. And the most important piece of evidence was the so-called casket letters. Their contents had not been revealed previously, but now they were listed as 8 letters from Mary to Bothwell, a love sonnet by her, and 2 marriage contracts between them. Whether the letters were genuine or forgeries is yet another one of these unanswered questions.
Okay, I was about to say, a love sonnet? I'm struggling.
Well, let me just tell you that those letters no longer exist because guess when they disappeared?
Right after the trial.
Just magically disappeared.
A love sonnet feels too far.
I mean, you didn't see the casket.
I wasn't in the bedroom with them, but God, I would have loved to be. Like a fly on the wall.
Okay, because I was going to make a threesome joke.
Not in a gross way. I don't want anything to do with him.
Elizabeth concluded the commission with what she does best, a non-decision. Oh wait, you're going to laugh more that James, the Earl of Moray, was an honorable man who should remain regent. And whilst nothing had been proven against Mary, which will be the song and dance for the rest of this episode, Elizabeth refused to hand Mary over to the Scottish government because she said, "You will execute her, and I'm not going to do that."
Well, that's ironic.
Isn't it, though?
Spoiler.
But I think that genuinely Elizabeth did not want this execution to happen.
I think Elizabeth felt like she was between a rock and a hard place. A lot of her reign was about not making a decision, which therefore did not piss somebody off.
Right.
Because the possibility of going back to Catholicism was better than being told no. And the possibility of murdering all the Catholics was better than being told no.
Right.
I don't know. I haven't decided. I've only been on the throne for 45 years, guys.
Yeah, I'm new at this.
I'm just not sure.
After the Conference of York, she is moved to a secure location.
Mary is still being held against her will in England.
Yes.
How is it that England decided they were legally allowed to hold her?
Yeah, there's no reason. There's no legal reason.
Okay, so there's no reason for her to be a captive,
other
but
than
she is.
We're protecting you because you're certainly going to die if you go back.
But why can't she go back to France, for instance? They don't have a legitimate reason to hold on to.
No, there's no legitimate reason because if she goes to France, she's going to be up Henry III or Charles VI butt. So, in the late 1560s, Northern England is pretty much Catholic. They're closest to Scotland, which used to be Catholic.
It's far too close to Edinburgh.
And York is really defensible.
Yeah.
So this posed an additional risk for the English government, which decided to scoot Mary down south. She was given to the care of George Talbot, the Earl of Shrewsbury, a loyal Protestant servant of the Queen Elizabeth, and his wife, the formidable Bess Hardwicke.
I like how she's described as formidable. I don't know her, but I like her.
And Shrewsbury were great folks to her. They gave her all the respect that was due to a queen, all the rigor, though, that was due to a prisoner.
That's a hard tightrope to walk.
She had her cloth of estate. She was able to fly her colors and things like that, but she was not able to go anywhere without permission from Elizabeth. And initially, she was on good terms with Bess Hardwicke, but we'll get back to that. A convocation at Perth rejected the idea of Mary's return, so the English got back together and was like, should we send her back? Is it time yet? Nah.
Because she's expensive, I would assume, to maintain as a queen and to keep as a prisoner. That's a lot of money.
Obviously, Mary was disappointed, but she had no clue what was coming in for her when Elizabeth found out that there was a secret marriage pact between Mary and the Duke of Norfolk, and she absolutely, and kind of rightfully, lost her shit.
But also, Mary's still a young woman. How old is she?
Yeah.
She's not.
She's in her 20s.
More than 30.
Yeah.
She's still got a sexual appetite.
Norfolk was clapped in the tower, and Mary became even more aware that she was absolutely not the honored guest that they had said she was a prisoner.
Yeah, I think if she didn't already know that, this definitely sealed that deal.
Her rooms were searched, the numbers of her attendants cut, and orders were given to prevent her from communicating with the outside world. world. She was, however, permitted to go visit Buxton and take the waters on several occasions. When there were no heightened security alerts, she was allowed to ride, to hunt, to hawk, and although she was surrounded by Shrewsbury's men, she did have direct access to exercise. Now, Mary did suffer persistent ill health, which had been potentially identified at that point as porphyria, a condition that has symptoms ranging from copious vomiting, pain, and complete debility in the limbs. Depression and neurological side effects are also symptoms.
And the most famous person to suffer from porphyria?
George III, one of her descendants. Here's the thing. I actually posted on our Patreon 2 different articles about her health because there's been a lot of debate as to whether George actually had porphyria and therefore whether or not she had porphyria.
Well, and George having it doesn't necessarily mean that she
Right.
did. It could easily be that her ill health was based on the treatment she suffered while pregnant, being imprisoned, and while she was allowed exercise, I'm sure she got far
Right.
less sunshine and vitamin D than necessary.
Another thing, she had a lot of anxiety, and those were tied with a lot of her gastrointestinal problems. So then we have the rising of the North. And if Norfolk hadn't been a problem before, he certainly was now. The Earl of Westmoreland, who is the brother-in-law of the imprisoned Norfolk, and Northumberland rose in an attempt to restore the old faith. Yeah. Just maybe don't, right? They did have initial success, and a full Catholic Mass was celebrated at Durham Cathedral. For the last time, it ended up being. Mary herself was not directly involved. She had condemned the enterprise and was unlikely to benefit from it. She didn't, and she was like, this is not gonna go. Don't do this. This is not smart.
It's not the moment.
And she was right. The rising was put down with remarkable savagery. Over 600 Catholics were hanged in the following 2 years. It was this rebellion that led to an uneasy truce with Elizabeth's Catholic subjects, whereby no questions were asked of those who conformed to the law. And this is where we get that famous quote, "I do not want a window into the souls of my subjects."
Very appropriate, and frankly, a quote people should be continuing to think of today.
Yeah, that very much fell away after this uprising.
Okay.
She towed a much more punitive line.
If people aren't going to be fine with religious freedom, then yeah, you're going to have to pick a side and come down hard if it's that or they're going to try to murder people.
Right, please don't murder people.
It's just not nice.
It's just not nice.
Quote of the episode, it's just not nice.
I agree. So, we are going to talk about the 4 plots that Mary allegedly was involved in. And the first is the Ridolfi plot. Ridolfi, who it is named after, is a murky character. We think he may have been a papal agent involved in the rising of the Northern Earls, but he persuaded authorities that he was totally blameless and could even be useful to negotiate better terms with the Netherlands. What gives him this clout? I don't know. But Elizabeth gave him a private audience and he was sent off, presumably. Yeah. She didn't know that he, in secret, had been in contact with Mary, although it is possible that he was a plant by none other than William Cecil.
Our favorite guy.
I hate this man. Mary accepted Ridolfi's offer to plead her cause to Philip II and the Pope, assuring him that with foreign aid, the debacle of the rising could be reversed, especially as she was continuing to correspond with Norfolk, promising marriage. True to form, Norfolk continued to dither, neither wholly approving of the plot against Elizabeth, nor informing her of what was going on, so trying to play the field. And he met with Ridolfi, but would not put his name to any letters to Philip. Once again, allowing false hope to color his reports, Ridolfi was convinced that Norfolk would support any invasion on Mary's behalf because they were allegedly maybe getting married. So Ridolfi continued to dispatch messages to the Duke of Alva, suggesting that time was right for Philip II to mount an invasion. Alva, although he approved of the principle, was still reluctant to commit immediately, especially as he took Ridolfi for a babbler.
He liked the sound of his own voice.
I do not, quite frankly.
Excellent. Thank God we podcast.
Yeah, thank you, pithy listeners. Anyway, Norfolk was being suggested as a husband for Mary with the agreement of her party in Scotland, those that were still in her camp, and some of Elizabeth's counselors, including Robert Dudley. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
He's a schemer, and I don't like him.
Just keeps cropping up.
This, they thought, might bolster the idea of a return to Scotland for Mary. The Protestant government guaranteed and Moray pardoned. Mary was willing to agree to this, despite her own religious views. Also, she had to have this marriage to Bothwell dissolved because she was still married to Bothwell legally. So Queen Elizabeth was not informed of the discussions about the marriage to Norfolk, but Mary, of course, was, and she and the Duke entered into correspondence and exchanged tokens. Mary's only provision was that Elizabeth must approve of the match. Mary's representative, Bishop Leslie, who was at best incompetent and was certainly involved in the rather harebrained scheme, it just is less clear that Mary gave anything other than a general approval to any scheme that might free her from captivity. And that's it.
All she wanted was to get out of there.
Yeah.
Okay.
The plot, unsurprisingly, was uncovered and Norfolk was arrested and executed.
Oops.
Since a number of Elizabeth's counselors had previously thought the match between Mary and Norfolk might be a good solution, they reacted by turntailing and saying, I never said that. That absolutely was not me. This was all Mary, and it's all her idea. It's all her idea. The English Parliament wanted her tried or executed under the Act of Attainder, but Elizabeth rejected any ideas of that, merely permitting a law to be passed, barring Mary from the English succession and subjecting her to an English trial in the event of another coup or plot. Yeah.
Bet Mary loved that.
It's 11 years later, and we get the Throckmorton plot, which is a great name, right?
Throckmorton.
The Throckmorton plot planned the murder of Elizabeth to replace her with Mary, and it contributed to the act of association, after which Mary would be held responsible for any plot carried out in her name, whether she knew about it or not.
That just feels...
entrapment-y.
Oh, I like it. Entrapment.
Guess who do you think wrote it?
Oh, our favorite guy, Cecil.
William Cecil. Francis Throckmorton, a young Englishman, planned for the Duke of Guise, Mary's cousin, because I suppose the uncle had died, to invade England, overthrow Elizabeth, restore Catholicism. Philip II would pay for it. The Pope also knew about the plot and allegedly approved. We don't know. Walsingham again uncovered the plot, finding the papers in Throckmorton's house, but Mary's involvement could never be proven. There was literally nothing to tie her to this one.
Well, except for the fact that her name is Mary, Queen of Scots.
Yes, exactly. So Throckmorton was tortured and executed in 1584.
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit more about that bond of association. We know there were several failed attempts to free Mary. Determined to prevent more, Walsingham and Cecil introduced the bond of association. This made Mary responsible for any plots instigated in her name, whether or not she knew about them or approved of them. And as the Encyclopedia of Tudor England explains, quote, the first clause of the bond pledged all who signed it to obey the Queen's command and to stand ready to resist, pursue, and destroy any persons who sought her life, unquote.
So the idea was that if someone wanted to try, they wouldn't, because they knew that Mary would be executed for their attempt without her approval.
Also, it granted them power if they thought somebody was going to kill the Queen. It's like a license to kill them.
Got it.
Signatories also had to agree that any attempt on Elizabeth's life would bar that person from the succession, namely Mary. And it was also taken to include the heirs of anyone benefiting from the assassination. So, if there was a plot to kill Elizabeth and replace her with Mary, signatories could kill both Mary and her son, James of Scotland.
Well, this certainly, shows how fearful Elizabeth was of this plot. I mean, she never named James as heir, which we know is a problem later. She's just so afraid that there'll be like a man, a woman. We're going to go with the guy.
An infant.
It doesn't matter. He has a penis.
Yeah.
Small though it may be.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
He's an infant. I'm not trying to say whether or not he's well endowed. I have no knowledge of that.
And praise the Lord for it.
I don't think I was James's type.
No, I don't think you were.
I don't have a penis.
Oh dear, Caroline.
What?
A sacred oath sealed the bond, and the bond was sent out around England thousands of people signed it, including, funnily enough, Mary, Queen of Scots.
Why?
It never directly says her name in it, so
she's not stupid. She's well educated.
Stupid.
I mean, probably if she didn't sign it, she knew she'd just be executed.
Or it would be taken.
Could also have been her way of communicating with James. Please don't do this.
Yeah.
Or James's people.
Yeah, that's true. I could definitely see at this point in her life, she very much wanted him protected.
Mm-hmm.
Let's jump to 1585. It's called the Contract of Amity, but boy did it produce nothing but acrimony. Mary was willing to do almost anything, including renounce her rights to the English throne, agree to amnesty with Scotland, even take part in a league against France if she could be freed either to rule with James in Scotland or then remain in England. But just be free, man. Just let me go hawk and ride.
The question of whether or not Mary understood all the plots is for the ages. But it certainly seems like her main goal was James safe, me out of here.
Emissaries winged between Mary, James, and Elizabeth. Mary, who had never ceased to love her son, hoped and probably prayed and assumed that he would be equally attached to her. But James had been told ever since his very earliest memories that his mother had murdered his father to marry her lover, and with no personal memory of her, had no desire to persuade Elizabeth to free her, did not want to rule with her, did not want anything to do with her. Nothing.
That is so heartbreaking. Everything about her story is heartbreaking.
Yep, thanks John Knox for being a total douchebag. Because it was largely Moray, Earl of Arran, and John Knox who were in his ear constantly. James and Elizabeth came to terms separately. James would continue an Anglo-Scottish alliance rather than diverting to friendship with France, and Elizabeth need only pay him sufficient gold. His mother's freedom was not a condition, one way or the other.
Off the table.
And now, just a little side note, take it or leave it. Another vexation for Mary at this point was being drawn into marital disputes between the Shrewsburys. Once very happy marriage had broken down into complete and total acrimony, and the Countess accused her husband of having an affair with Mary. The outraged queen wrote to Elizabeth demanding to be allowed to come to London to clear her own name, and retaliated by repeating every bit of salacious gossip that she and Bess Shrewsbury had shared over their embroidery needles in the early days of Mary's captivity. Whether Elizabeth ever received this letter is unknown.
Yeah, I'm not sure it would have really been sent, but I want to know the hot goss.
I want to know the hot goss. Couldn't find it.
Oh, fuck.
Couldn't find it.
You're going to pour some tea. Okay, fine.
Not yet. It's coming. In 1585, we get the Parry plot to assassinate Elizabeth, and guess what put Mary, Queen of Scots, on the throne? William Parry had been working as a double agent for both Mary and Elizabeth. Elizabeth was informed that he had planned to kill her either in a private meeting or by ambushing her. There were calls for Mary to also be brought to justice, but there was zero proof of her being involved in the Parry plot.
Except for that little bond of association. So she could have done it here, and I'm sure Elizabeth's advisors were like, just murder her. Just do it. Just get rid of her.
Yeah. I mean, Parry was hanged for treason, but I think that Elizabeth needed a little bit more. I really think she needed more to do it, to finally...
Well, and assassinating or executing a sitting queen, sitting in England instead of Scotland,
yes,
but a sitting queen all the same, is a big step towards Elizabeth getting assassinated or executed by some male relative.
Exactly. You can't do regicide.
And it's a precedent that Elizabeth didn't want to set.
Exactly. She does punish Mary by giving her a new jailer, Sir Amias Paulet. He detested her and revoked many of the privileges that the Shrewsburys had allowed her. Paulet was a punctilious man, and I had to look this up.
It's a great word.
He obeyed the letter of the law, and apparently he was not kind. He was an incredibly strict Puritan.
That would be fun. For the girl who loved to dance and sing and play and talk, and so frivolous.
Yeah. Where Shrewsbury had been very generous in the interpretation of the rules, Paulette was as harsh as possible. He removed her cloth of state, which she had had since her arrival in England, and was an important signifier of rank. He also banned charitable activities, such as the distribution of maundy or giving presents to any of the household servants, lest she corrupt them.
Or win herself friends.
Right. Let's also note that he is that notoriously strict Puritan, and guess who was also a very notoriously strict Puritan? Robert Dudley, William Cecil, and Francis Walsingham's little cabal. I don't like these men.
You don't say.
I'm just as shocked as you. So, the Babington plot. This is the very famous one that finally caught Mary in the crosshairs. Mary was secretly corresponding with supporters, but she did know that at least some of her letters were being read by Walsingham, so she knew this was going on. A group of young men, prominent amongst them Anthony Babington, of whom the plot is named, the Catholic gentleman from Derbyshire who had been a page in the Shrewsbury household, and conceived another romantic admiration, a parasocial relationship for the unhappy captive queen. Apparently this happened at least twice. Men would just show up in her rooms and beg to be with her.
Be her savior.
Yeah, and she had to call for guards, her captives, to come save her from these men who were just like, I love you, we need to be together, let's run away.
Well, she was beautiful and a woman in distress. A queen. Chivalric code runs deep.
Yeah.
And is pretty sexy for a man who wants to be needed.
I suppose.
To be a hero.
Yeah, but you've never talked to her before.
Knight in shining armor fantasy.
Weird, but you're right. After this whole hey, I love you situation had gone down, he had been persuaded by a guy named Thomas Morgan to carry more secret letters to Mary. Morgan had initially worked for Mary's official agent in Paris, who was in charge of her French financial affairs, but had probably been turned into one of Walsingham's spies.
Great.
Babington later tried to withdraw from any involvement in Mary's affairs, likely noting that things were going wrong and he had been caught in this double agent.
He hadn't been caught, he had decided to place himself there.
No, I think he then realized that Morgan was not who he said he was.
Oh, I see. Okay.
He became entangled with another double agent named Robert Coley, who persuaded him that he should help rescue the queen and that the Spanish would totally mount an invasion to support her.
Is Babington just an idiot?
I think so. He was just a page in the Shrewsbury household. He was probably young and stupid. So a scheme had been developed by Walsingham and Cecil to communicate secretly with Mary through smuggling in letters in beer barrels to her new location at Chartley, because Chartley, the house that she was living in with Paulette, was moated. She could not get out, and no one could get in.
The prison walls are getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
She was basically in confinement.
A dungeon.
But they put letters in beer barrels to get to her, which is kind of funny.
I bet they smelled delicious.
Babington was induced to use this method of communication to make contact with the queen, quite unaware that every letter in or out was being read by Walsingham's agents.
Yeah.
Eventually, the incriminating letter was sent. Babington told Mary that he and his fellows would assassinate Elizabeth. Everything depended on Mary's response. If she did not specifically forbid the assassination, she would be guilty by association.
What did she do?
Allegedly, Mary's response was to emphasize the risks of the plot, the necessity for the foreign army to be real, not imaginary, and for her to be rescued before Paulette knew of the death of Elizabeth. Philippe, Walsingham's agent, drew a gallows next to Mary's word, effectively sealing her fate.
All right. Did Mary know it was being read?
So, we're going to break this down pithy style. Cecil and Walsingham used their spies to convince a man who had a parasocial crush on Mary to rescue her because she was in imminent danger. They convinced him that the Spanish were coming to her aid, but only he could be the saving agent to get her to safety. She did not negate the plan when it was brought to her attention, but that handy-dandy Philippe helped her to the gallows by forging a postscript that was designed to further implicate her.
Okay.
After Mary's conviction, Walsingham wrote to Paulette requesting that he assassinate Mary to spare Elizabeth from involvement in her death.
Wow.
And in a letter to Walsingham, Paulette refused to make so great a shipwreck of my conscience, or to leave so great a blot to my poor posterity as shed her blood without law or warrant.
Good for Paulette.
It was the only decent thing he did by her.
Except that he knew that if Elizabeth found out that he murdered her, she'd put him on the gallows, no problem.
Yup.
Elizabeth would be like, great, I don't have to do this, and I can look like a wonderful person
I have a
by
scapegoat.
saying, you go to jail. You get assassinated. And you couldn't let him talk, because then he might say something stupid.
And he was eventually appointed the Chancellor of the Order of the Garter. So he got out pretty good.
Comparatively.
Mary was tried for treason at Fotheringhay Castle. And Cecil was like a kid in a candy store because he had finally gotten what he wanted.
Like a kid on Christmas morning.
As much as Walsingham helped her to the gallows, so did he. He was so excited about this trial, we even have records of his seating arrangements that he came up with for this trial. Not a joke.
It's like he's planning a wedding.
Yes.
My uncle can't sit next to my aunt because of that nasty divorce.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Mary remained in captivity, proper captivity. Lord Cecil had planned for the sentence to be ratified by Parliament to try to force Elizabeth's hand. Quote, the manner of the Queen of Scots' life and her practices from the beginning have been the most filthy and detestable. If you look well into them, you shall find that her ambitious mind, grounded in papistry, still thirsted after this crown of England and our overthrow, unquote.
All right, I call BS on that one.
Yeah.
Went too far.
Come on, man. She just wants to get out of here.
Too far. She just wants to be loved.
A joint petition of the two houses was presented requesting that direction be given for further proceeding against the said Scottish Queen according to the true meaning of the law.
I'm not sure there was any true meaning of things happening there.
Historian John Gee, author of My Heart Is My Own, The Life of Mary Queen of Scots, has written a really, really good chapter on Mary's downfall called Nemesis. Quote, Mary Queen of Scots had at first refused to appear before Elizabeth I's commission, but had been told by William Cecil that the trial would take place with or without her.
Pick your poison.
She appeared in front of the commission at 9 a.m., dressed in a black velvet gown and a white cambric cap and veil. Mary then protested against the commission, arguing that the court was not legitimate and arguing against the fact that she was not allowed a legal defense and was not able to call any witnesses.
So court is a really, really strong term for what this actually was.
Mary was also not permitted to examine any of the documents being used against her. Her protests, of course, were in vain, and the prosecution went ahead and opened the trial with an account of the Babington plot, arguing that Mary knew of the plot, had given it her approval, and agreed with it, and had promised to help. Mary, of course, protested her innocence, quote, I knew not Babington. I never received any letters from him, nor wrote any to him. I never plotted the destruction of the Queen. If you want to prove it, then produce my letters signed with my own hand, unquote.
Oh, shoot, Mary, you walked right into that one.
And the council says, but we have evidence of the letters between you and Babington. Mary says, if so, why do you not produce them? I have the right to demand to see the originals and copies side by side. It is quite possible that my ciphers have been tampered with by my enemies. I cannot reply to this accusation without full knowledge. Until then, I must content myself with affirming solemnly that I am not guilty of the crimes imputed to me, unquote. Unfortunately for Mary, Elizabeth's spymaster, Francis Walsingham, had collected a great deal of evidence, whether or not...
Can we say quote-unquote evidence?
Yes, we can say quote-unquote evidence.
We will say quote-unquote evidence.
You do have a confession from Anthony Babington, who had pled guilty at his own trial, but guess how they got that confession?
Torturous means.
A deciphered transcript in English of Mary's reply to Babington. So that's deciphered, not the original.
Got it.
A reciphered copy of Mary's original letter to Babington, which looked, quote, exactly like the original, but also
not
the original. And confessions from Mary's secretaries, who, after the trial, just mysteriously got to leave England on the English government's dime.
Goodness, that sounds very innocent to
Totally
me.
innocent.
Totally.
When the prosecution produced all of this, quote, evidence, Mary burst into tears but still denied her involvement, claiming that the documents were counterfeit. Walsingham proclaimed his innocence, stating that the documents were real. A distraught Mary proclaimed, quote, I would never make a shipwreck of my soul by conspiring the destruction of my dear sister, unquote. And the court was adjourned for lunch.
They're so hungry. They've done such hard work creating all of these fake documents.
All of this evidence.
They needed
yes.
some sustenance, some beer.
After lunch, the secretary's confessions were read aloud, much to Mary's shock and horror. Mary argued that her letters must have been tampered with. Quote, the majesty and safety of all princes falleth to the ground if they depend upon the writings and testimony of their secretary. I am not to be convicted except by my own word or writing, unquote. The trial continued the next day, with the prosecution accusing Mary of consenting to Elizabeth's assassination. Mary tried to argue that although she had written, quote, set the gentlemen to work taking order upon the accomplishing of their designs, unquote, she had not specified what the work was.
All right, Mary, I was with you up until that moment, but
Yeah.
I mean, duh.
Yeah, however, as the prosecution pointed out, Mary had also appealed for foreign help, and although she argued that an act of war, even if it resulted in Elizabeth's death, was legitimate if it allowed her, a queen, to be free at last, the commission saw her actions as an act of treason.
Again, you can't be treasonous against a country that you don't belong to. Right.
As the trial closed, Mary demanded that she should be heard in front of Parliament or the Queen, but she was fighting a losing battle.
If Elizabeth hasn't met her yet, it's not going to happen now when she's produced fake evidence against her.
Right.
Come on, Mary.
The sentence was delayed as long as possible by order of Elizabeth, but the following year the commission reconvened and found Mary guilty.
Elizabeth just did not want to say, kill her.
Mm-hmm.
And did not want a guilty sentence because then she has to do something about it.
Yeah.
Because treason equals death. But it sounds like no one except Elizabeth and Mary wanted to toe that line. Everybody else wanted a death warrant.
Oh, they were happy.
Here's my question. William Cecil is a bad dude.
Yes.
Agreed. But why are these people so desperate to kill Mary? What is it about killing Mary that helps them? Besides the financial, which I do understand she's a drain.
The financial, and I think they just wanted the foreign policy issue to be over.
Because they really did want to continue with Scotland, but it's hard to do so with Mary sitting in jail.
Well, that and the issue of succession.
And they probably didn't want to give Spain any kind of a Catholic martyr. It just seems, well, fake.
Yeah. There's been a whole lot of praise for Mary's legal arguments because she did make very eloquent arguments that she wasn't an English subject and therefore couldn't be held as an English traitor. She'd been denied legal counsel or the right to view evidence brought against her, and mentioned, of course, that she was a queen anointed by God and it would literally be a sin to kill her.
I think all of her legal arguments are sound, but the problem was she's not in a legal court.
100%.
She's in a kangaroo court. And she knew that, so she's saying all these things not because she thinks it's gonna help her, although I think she's still hoping that Elizabeth will do the right thing.
Well,
but I think she's saying it for posterity. She's saying it so that podcasters like us look at it and go, she's right.
She's not wrong.
She's still dead.
We do have surviving letters between Mary and Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
We have this one quote that I found really compelling.
Tell me.
After Darnley had died in that incredibly suspicious explosion, Elizabeth wrote to Mary, urging her to distance herself from the scandalous tragedy. Quote, I treat you as my daughter, and I assure you that if I had one, I could wish for her nothing better than I desire for you, unquote. And if you're saying that to someone, if I received that from somebody, I would feel like she's not going to chop my head off.
Again, Mary thinks people are going to do the right thing. And as we've learned from my traumatic airport experience. People do not do the right thing.
No, they do not.
And Elizabeth specifically always waxed lyrical. That was her gift. She would take these suitors and say, I do love you. I just don't know. I think Mary was taken in by that. And I think both of them hoped for a different relationship because they were their closest female relatives.
And I definitely think that's in Mary's character because you can see how much she wants to be loved and how much she wants that strong relationship because in her life, who has loved her? Henry II?
I have changed my mind about the relationship between Francis and Mary all those years ago.
I love it. Okay, tell me.
I think Mary is a naively hopeful person based on everything that you've presented, and that I do think she loved Francis because he loved her. I still don't think there was a passionate romance.
And I don't want a passionate romance. They're 15.
I know, babes. Well, passionate romance at 15, that's like prime spot.
Is it?
Even holding hands is like super alluring. Well, I don't know. 15-year-olds now are probably doing other things.
When I was 15.
All right, that makes me sound older than I feel. So, not than I am, just than I feel. I do think that she loved him, and I will give you, I think it was more than just a brotherly love. I think that she appreciated having someone who had her back.
Yep.
And she never had it again. So I think it was a different romance than I gave it credit for.
This is the best, my biggest win, I think, in Pithy Chronicle history.
I don't think we have to go that far, but all right.
Oh, I do.
I still say that pizza-faced, 5 inches shorter than sickly little boy is not a sexy object of affection.
It's not about that.
It's about something. Halitosis is a pungent problem. And I think she probably loved him more at this point when she thought back to him now as an adult.
Oh, yes.
All right, let's kill her off. Let's end the agony.
Yeah. Mary, in February of 1587, was 44 years old, had spent 19 years in captivity. She was deposed by her country, abandoned by her son, and all she had left was her faith. She was executed at Fotheringhay Castle, and we have a full, very graphically detailed first-hand account of what happened. That's going on our Patreon. But no dignity was given to this woman when she died.
On.
She tried to be very strong. She said, I need my ladies to undress me, to take her cap off, to get her prepared for getting her head chopped off.
You don't want a lot of extra fabric so that they miss the neck.
And they said, no, if you want to take your clothes off, the men are going to have to do it.
What dicks.
She had to be stripped in front of a crowd by men she didn't know. Did not have anyone to help her or comfort her. She cried. She did it quietly, but she cried. Her undergarments were red, the color of Catholic martyrdom, and I do think she was a martyr.
Yeah, I don't know that she's a Catholic martyr so much as she is a legal martyr. She was illegally executed.
A feminist martyr?
Ooh, better. Feminist martyr.
And so...
You can do it.
They chopped her head off, and it took 3 whacks.
What? Even Elizabeth's mom was given a swordsman from France.
Yep.
Did she, I think I want to ask. Did she die on the first whack and it just took longer to get the head to come off?
Recollections may vary, as Queen Elizabeth II says.
Jesus.
One source says that she let out a terrible scream/moan, but most people agree that she experienced a tremendous amount of pain between whack 1 and whack 2. Whack 3 was to get it clear off.
Did Elizabeth watch?
No, Elizabeth didn't know this was going on.
Oh.
Here is what happened, Caroline.
Go, Erica.
Elizabeth was pressured because frickin' William Cecil would not frickin' shut up. I'm getting red in the face. Can you see this?
You are. You're turning into a tomato.
He would not stop haranguing her about this till she finally was like, here, fine, I sign it, but you put this in the bottom of the basket, and I never want to see you or hear you talk about this again.
Oh, so he just took care of things.
He sat on it for months until it was convenient for him. Maybe it was a bad Tuesday and he was like, I need a thrill. I'm going to kill off Mary Queen of Scots finally. But his undersecretary, the only person of Elizabeth's council who didn't sign the bond of association, William Davison, was the one who actually took the piece of paper and executed the warrant. Elizabeth was so furious because she was only informed after Mary was dead. And she told Davison to never darken her doorstep again and banned William Davison from ever coming into London. And while this was all going on, William Cecil hightailed his butt out into his country estate because he couldn't be bothered to take the blame. And it took about
They shot that messenger.
Yeah, and it took about 6 months for William Cecil to ever come back into service with Elizabeth.
Did Elizabeth get over it and treat him as she had before, or did it taint the rest of their relationship, one hopes and prays?
The relationship was tainted, but they did make peace on his deathbed, and she went to him the day he died, and reports say that she fed him with her own hand, and he died later that night.
Well, he did not deserve that shit, but I don't know that I want Elizabeth feeding me by hand either.
No. I really think historian Jane Lewis said it best. Quote, "For every Protestant who saw Mary as a bloodthirsty harlot, there was thus a Catholic to see her as a pious martyr. For every Scottish person who had heard she was a Frenchified interloper, there was a French one who understood her to be the rightful unifier of the thrones of England, Scotland, and France. For every man who loathed and repudiated her as a Jezebel, there was a woman to love her as a composite of the biblical Marys who participated in Christ's passion."
Applause for Jane Lewis. That was excellent.
I genuinely buy into that.
I do too. She's a polarizing figure.
Perfectly said. All right, what was she fighting for, Caroline?
I think it depends where you are in her life.
Yes.
At the beginning of her life, she is fighting for a family, for belonging, for a place. She was not abandoned by any means, but was not afforded a true childhood or any kind of a maternal love because she was in danger. She was also not afforded any peace. From the get-go, someone was trying to kill her. And that sucks. I can't imagine growing up with that kind of Damoclesian sword. But when she came to Scotland, I do think she had really good intentions. She wanted to unify her people, to represent them as a whole, fighting for a unified Scotland in this very difficult time for her people. With her second marriage, I think she was fighting for Elizabeth's attention. She didn't have any female confidants or any female support. And she wanted to fight for Elizabeth's. She wanted to fight for that relationship. I don't think she wanted the English crown. I don't think she wanted it in France. That was old men putting her name on things. I don't think she wanted it in Scotland. That was English old men fighting for things. But I think her marriage was her attempt to make peace within the feminine world of power. And then I think for a long time she was fighting for her son's survival. That is something that he never recognized in her, and that is a tragedy. But she did not want James to lose what he was entitled to, and she did not want James to die. And then with Bothwell, I think she just was fighting for literal survival.
Yeah.
And then when she escaped to England, she's fighting again for that familial relationship with Elizabeth. She's fighting for a meeting of the minds and, frankly, a meeting of the persons. She wanted to meet this woman and say, look at me. I'm not scary. I'm not really all that ambitious. I mean, she could have been, as Jane Lewis said in that quote, she could have unified England, Scotland, and France. She was the one body that could do that. And she wasn't fighting for that. That was important to other people. But to her, she just wanted to be cared for. And she hoped Elizabeth would be her sister, her mom, as Elizabeth said.
Family.
And then eventually that freedom. We talk about in the first episode that she loved life. She loved to hunt. She loved to dance. She loved music. She had a very lively personality. And now she's literally in a cage, gilded, though it may be.
Not with Paulette.
Well, it started gilded, and then Paulette made it iron bars.
So I think for me, it comes down to freedom.
Mm-hmm.
In France, she fought for the freedom and the privilege to have a family. In Scotland, with her marriage to Darnley, she was trying to fight for that freedom to love. With imprisonment, she was fighting for actual freedom. Even if that's just the freedom to exist somewhere, even unhappily.
Freedom of religion. Freedom for privacy as a queen who was so public.
Mm-hmm.
Freedom for family, to have a family that had been denied her entire life.
Mm-hmm.
Freedom to love. Freedom for her son James. And freedom for Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate to say, she received no freedom.
Yep.
She did not win freedom of religion. It became very Protestant and anti-Catholic.
No freedom.
She did not have the freedom to have privacy. She never had privacy. Her letters were read. Even on her death, she was accosted by men she'd never met and physically touched and taken. She did not get any kind of freedom of family because she never got to know her son. And in fact, what would have been a natural biological bond was destroyed by others. She did not have the freedom to love. I mean, perhaps with Francis, but again, even though she cared for him, I don't think he would have been her first choice of guy.
No, she's not going to be like, woohoo, can't wait.
There's no freedom for her love life with Bothwell. He stole that from her.
Yep.
There was no freedom for her to be with James, although James did, in fact, receive his own freedom.
Yeah,
so
'cause he
perhaps
did.
we can say that that's the only one she succeeded in.
Yeah.
And Scotland's freedom. That was gone too, because James took that one away. So, sucks. Be kind to others.
The woman covered in vomit.
Help the woman covered in vomit. Help Mary Queen of Scots. It did not happen for her, but we all have the chance to make our own histories and to make a better freedom for the next generation. And I think she said in her legal battles, this is wrong, and she knew she was going to die for it anyway.
And that, my friends, is that. I'm Eric.
I'm Caroline. You aren't Caroline. You can take so much, but you can't
And
take my
I'm
damn
Erica.
thing.
And we are Fifthly Yours.
This episode is brought to you by the Pithy Chronicle, LLC. The Pithy Chronicle is intended for education, entertainment, and non-commercial purposes. Any views or opinions expressed in this podcast are personal and do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the owner may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity. While we offer lots of sarcasm, this podcast does not offer any advice or services. Listening to this podcast may induce fits of laughter, unexpected distraction, or uncontrollable rage at the subjects, hopefully not at us. We hope you learned something today. If not, so sorry. Please be advised we are not experts in the following fields: medical, legal, financial, technological, thermonuclear engineering, submarine warfare, neuroscience, or cat husbandry. Thanks for listening to our little disclaimer. Just covering our history-loving asses. Bye!